We're always talking about boomers, millennials, and Gen Z. Their values, their habits, their impact. It's a constant cultural conversation. But what about that generation stuck right in the middle? The one we almost never seem to discuss. Well, today we're going to dive in and figure out why.
And it's a real question, isn't it? There's this entire group of people that seems to slip right through the cracks of our cultural radar, almost like they were designed to be overlooked.
That's right, we are talking about Generation X. These are the people who quietly built so much of the modern world we're living in, but they rarely take credit for it. And look, if you really want to get what makes them tick, you've got to go right back to the beginning, back to their childhood.
So here it is. The key to pretty much the entire Gen X psyche can be found right here, in the silence of an empty house after school. And for so many of them, this was an exception. It was just the daily routine.
This phrase, latchkey kids, it is so central to their story. As dual-income households became the norm, millions of kids were coming home, letting themselves in with a key from under the doormat, and were basically left to their own devices for hours on end.
And get this, the sheer scale of it is just staggering. By 1984, that's how many kids between 5 and 13 were regularly on their own after school. So we're not talking about some niche experience here. This was a massive, generation-defining phenomenon.
And that leaves a mark, a really deep one. This goes way beyond learning how to make your own microwave popcorn. It's this fundamental bedrock lesson of self-reliance, learned at an age when you're incredibly impressionable. You learn to depend on yourself because, well, you have no other choice.
Psychologists actually have a name for the kind of world these kids grew up in. They call it a high-contingency environment. It sounds a little fancy, but the idea is actually super simple and, frankly, pretty harsh. There was just no one around to soften the blow or mediate what happened next.
So let's break that down. What does that actually mean? You break a glass, you're the one cleaning it up, hoping no one finds out. You miss the bus, you're walking home. See? No buffer, no parent to smooth things over. Cause and effect were locked together, and it taught them to solve their own problems, fast.
Okay, so what happens when you take that hardcore self-reliance they learned as kids and you mix it with the world they saw growing up? Well, you get this armor of skepticism. And it wasn't a choice, it was a survival tool.
Just look at the world they were growing up in. They watched presidents resign in disgrace. They saw the very idea of marriage crumble as divorce rates went through the roof. They watched their parents give decades of loyalty to a company, only to be rewarded with a pink slip. The message was loud and clear. You just couldn't trust the big institutions.
So, yeah, a psychologist might call this defensive pessimism. Hoping for the best but expecting the worst so you're never disappointed. But if you ask a Gen Xer, they just call it being realistic. They saw the rug get pulled out from under people way too many times to believe it wouldn't happen to them too.
And you know what? This skepticism totally explains their whole vibe with stuff like social media. They came from a world where if you made a mistake, only a few people knew. The idea of broadcasting your every thought and move doesn't just feel weird, it feels like a liability. It's not that they don't get the tech, it's that they deeply understand the downside of being too visible.
All right, so if you can't trust institutions, what's left? What can you actually rely on? For Gen X, the answer was pretty simple. You trust yourself. You trust your skills, you trust your own ability to get the job done.
And that right there, that's the absolute core of the Gen X work ethic. They watched their parents get burned, so they knew company loyalty was mostly a one-way street. So their loyalty shifted inward. They figured, okay, I can't control the economy, I can't control my boss, but I can control how good I am at my job. Your competence became your job security.
Okay, so this brings us to this really interesting paradox at the heart of this generation. On one hand, they are fiercely, almost stubbornly independent. To them, asking for help can feel like admitting you failed. But, and this is the flip side, those same latchkey kids learned how to depend on each other. They'll show up, help you move a couch, and not say a word about it, because they formed these super tight bonds out of pure necessity. And that all boils down to this one simple, unspoken rule they live by at work. It's like, look, if you're good at your job, if you're competent, they will respect you, period. But if you're just a fancy title with nothing to back it up, forget it. They have zero time for that. It's all about what you can do, not what your business card says.
So let's circle back to this idea of them being the invisible generation. What if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if that quiet, overlooked nature is actually their most important role in our world right now?
I mean, just think about the economic hits they've taken over and over again. They graduated into a recession, the dot-com bubble wiped out their first investments, and then the 2008 financial crisis hit right in their peak earning years. All that repeated trauma, it definitely made them cautious, for sure. But man, it also made them unbelievably resilient.
And we can't forget this. This is huge. They are literally the last generation that remembers what life was like before the internet. They know how to fix things without a YouTube tutorial, how to find information without a search bar. Look, this isn't a better or worse thing. It's just different. They have this whole analog toolkit for solving problems that's just becoming so rare.
And that right there, that's their unique spot in all of human history. They are the bridge. They're fluent in both worlds. They get the analog world of the boomers, and they built the digital world that millennials and Gen Z were born into. They are the translators between two completely different eras.
In this metaphor, it just nails it, doesn't it? You don't really think about a bridge. It's just there, doing its job, holding everything together, connecting two totally different worlds. And that, right there, is the essence of Gen X.
So yeah, that radical self-reliance, it's absolutely their greatest strength. It had to be. But it does leave us with this one last kind of haunting question to think about. What does a society gain, but also what might it lose when an entire generation perfects the art of being alone?